Sounds good.
Hello, everyone. I'm joined today with Lunar Archivist, a critic of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's coverage of GamerGate and a supporter of the movement. How are you doing today, Lunar Archivist?
Uh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, of course. Now you've sent me some stuff to go over a little bit before. Now you said you don't expect me to go through all of it, of course, but you have what, over 1,000 documents that you've
Oh,
publicly
okay.
upvoted about the CBC's coverage of Gamergate.
Okay. Well, I should explain what exactly that is. I have something that I call like the CBC GamerGate archive. What I essentially did was I screenshotted I screenshotted everything I could possibly find to archive it in one form or another. Just to give you what's called because of the CBC's tendency to memory hole stuff. Basically, what happens is that after a certain amount of time, if the CBC has any videos or recordings, they basically get transferred to their archive and are removed from online, like from being available online. So in some cases, some of this stuff I only have because other people archived it because I downloaded it at some point or something like that. They also started removing their comment sections. So I basically, since you can't really archive comment sections, I just screenshotted all of it for the relevant articles. And I also screenshotted a bunch of tweets that were since deleted. So that's why it's so big.
All right, I know that we are a little bit of under a time constraint, so we're probably not going to do the main question list. I will send that to you if you want to fill it out for text form. But because we've only got about like an hour and 45 minutes or so, um,
Sure.
let's talk about
Whatever.
let's start off with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation has covered Gamergate quite a bit. There's quite a few articles and radio broadcasts that they've done talking about the topic. Three of these were by a specific person. The early coverage of Gamergate was designated to their culture writer, Kim Leineken.
Uh yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's she's one of the people who she's one of the definitely one of the people who first covered it. Yes. I think the first person who actually mentioned it tangentially was John Bowman, but he's a whole he's a whole mess on his own. But we can discuss. But Kim Leinekin is fine. We can
Well,
start with her.
actually,
No problem.
okay. So okay, we can get to John Bowman. I saw you have like almost 100 things relating to him.
Yeah,
Uh, so,
yeah,
but Kim Leineken, she is a culture writer for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. She was interviewed 3 times by three
yeah.
different interviewers who work for. Let me for the book. We want to make sure we don't. I'll try not to interrupt you too. Um, so
Nope. Go ahead.
she was interviewed 3 times,
Hmm.
and let me go ahead and pull up that specific file here. Do you mind if I screen share this for the public?
1 second. Let me just have a look at what you're looking. What are you screen sharing exactly? I can't see
The
what
Kim
you're referring
Leineken
to.
file, for that you've gone over
Uh
from the mega file.
sure, no problem. I don't should be fine. No problem.
Okay, I'll go ahead and pull that up and screen share it.
Let's have a look. Just as long as I can see it as well.
It'll be on the YouTube stream and Twitch and Kick, but let me see if I'd probably screen share on with YouTube. Give me 1 sec.
Hmm.
Set that up. Well, I don't know if I can screen share it over Discord. Oh,
Hmm.
it finally
Give.
worked. There we go.
Oh, let's have. Oh, let me just pop it up and let's have a look. Hmm.
There we go.
Where did it go?
All
I'm
right.
trying to find it.
So,
I. Hmm.
no, I've got it. It's all working. All right, you ready?
Yeah, sure. Oh, okay.
Okay.
So I don't see it on my screen yet. That's all.
It's going to be on the Discord.
Ah, okay.
If you open the open the box.
There it is. I see it. I see it right now. There we go. There it is.
You've done a statistical analysis of these 3 interviews. And we should probably point out who those interviews were with.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
All right. I've gone over some of this beforehand. All right. Interview A. Interview A. Kim Lanikin is interviewed by Stephen Quinn for On the Coast to discuss GamerGate. Interview B. Kim Lanikin is interviewed by the CBC Yukon radio program Airplay, ironically enough, with Dave White. Interview C, the GamerGate Phenomenon, unofficial title, which aired as part of the CBC Ottawa's radio program All in a Day with Alan Neal. Now, these were 3 interviews with 3 different interviewers, but she was the person being interviewed in all 3 cases to discuss and explain GamerGate. Now, as you've done a statistical analysis of these 3 interviews and found that there is is there 73.09% overlap or is there 88.69% overlap?
Okay. Well, okay. I'll explain what I did here. Basically, what happened is that, as you said, Kim Lanikin did 3 interviews on the same day about GamerGate, 3 different radio hosts from the CBC. What happens is that while I was transcribing these interviews, right? I finished one and then I started the next one, and I'm like, I got a sense of deja vu, and I was like, I've heard this before. And then I went back and I re-listened to the first one, and I was like, wait, this is almost the same thing word for word. And it wasn't just her, it was the introduction to it. So I went back, and then I found out there was a 3rd interview. And you know what Ian Fleming said, once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is warfare. I took all the interviews, I put them next to each other, and I highlighted all the text that was identical in all 3. And what I basically found is that 73% of her answers were identical. And of the introduction given by the radio show hosts to introduce GamerGate as a concept, 89% of it was identical. So basically what this shows is that the entire interview from start to finish was entirely scripted. Like, the introduction was agreed upon in advance. The question, you could get away with the questions being agreed upon in advance, because if you're gonna be interviewed by someone as their pop culture expert and have to show, like video clips or audio clips or something like that, you have to have some expectations of how to build that into the schedule. But it's weird for the interviewers statements to all be scripted. It was, the hilarious part was there was one point where I think they were going to mention a culture war. And as you can see, with Stephen Quinn, right? Stephen Quinn brings up the culture war himself, and so does Alan Neal. But what happens is that Dave White missed his cue, and then Kim Lanikin had to bring up the culture war line herself, so to kind of bring him back on track. So basically, this whole thing was scripted from start to finish. And it was just, I found this utterly mind-blowing. I'm like, you don't expect this from a news organization. You could expect a certain kind of structure, but not this. At least not to this degree. This just seems blatantly dishonest to me. I don't know what you think of this, but...
Well, it's not really my place to give opinions just yet. Now, this does seem very odd. And is it... So these are different radio shows that she's doing the interviews on. These radio shows are also available online, or they were historically. So
they were historically, yes.
So they weren't just radio broadcasts; they were online, basically like podcasts too, you could say.
Yes, they were.
Yes. So she's done 3 interviews, same day, with 3 different radio hosts and podcasters, all for the CBC. Is it the case that they're just like, hey, look, the interviewers, there probably was a coordination, right? Did they say, here's what we're going to talk about beforehand, and some sort of private communication where they're like, here's how I want the conversation to... they probably shouldn't say that, but here's the kind of things I want to talk about in the interview beforehand. Exactly. She sent that to them, and they just they didn't know anything about the topic, so they ran with it, or what happened here?
Yeah, to be perfectly honest, that's a bit beyond my knowledge. I don't have inside knowledge of how, you know, how interviews are structured at the CBC, obviously, because I'm not an insider. But I don't know, like based on my, like this is not a scientific metric, but based on my gut feeling, if you're doing an interview with your pop culture expert or something like that, I would suspect you'd basically have a discussion beforehand and say, okay, here's a list of questions I may ask you. You can pick from any one. Like I'll ask you maybe, let's say, here's a list of 10 questions. I may end up asking you like 5 of them on thing. You can prepare that. But this thing basically was the entire thing. Like I said, the entire thing was scripted from start to finish, like including their reactions and comments of the interviewer. So that's I find a bit weird. So like I said, it's like giving a live performance rather than anything organic.
It is weird that all 4 of these people repeat this. I mean, they're all saying exactly the same thing, word for word almost. And so,
yeah, I mean, yeah. So for Leinekin, it's not really a surprise because she had to, like, she made, like, she has specific jokes and quips that lead into the audio clips she wanted to play. So hers being partially scripted makes sense, but not the host's responses. I would say that's a whole different level.
No, I agree. I mean, I've done interviews, I've done media tours to like a minor extent. Repeating yourself to some degree, it's to be expected if you're being interviewed. Or if you're a public figure who's talking about a public issue on a regular basis, you're going to repeat yourself to some extent. But the interviewers themselves, I think that is actually the very, very weird aspect of this. And I have reached out to Kim. I've not reached out to the other 3 people to see if they want to talk about what happened.
Yeah, I like I said, knowing the setup in advance is something that I'm like, I don't know how the CBC sets things up. So, I mean, when I first brought this up, I remember I brought this up on a subreddit, and then, it was the usual types, they're like, oh, Lunar's a genius. He's figured out the syndication exists. And I'm like, no, that's not what this is. This isn't syndication. This is just bizarre. But Linekin has like some really strange ideas. I mean, she mentioned GamerGate again in her end of the year like summary of pop culture developments, and you don't have to look very far to see like how she's really biased about certain things. Just to give you an example, in 2014, there was an incident. I'm sure everyone remembers this. Remember, like when Beyonce Knowles, like kid sister, like attacked Jay-Z in an elevator?
Oh,
I'm sure everyone remembers that,
I don't
right?
follow celebrity stuff, but
okay. I'll give you a quick, just as a quick summary, right? Beyonce Knowles' little sister like attacked Jay-Z in an elevator, and that same year there was a football player. I think his name was Ray Rice, but I'm not sure. He attacked his then girlfriend and future wife in an elevator as well.
I've heard of this one, yes.
And knocked her. I think he knocked her out and he pulled her around by her hair. Like the violence level was different. Let's not even debate that, right? But basically, you have 2 similar incidents in the sense that you have a female celebrity attacking a male celebrity in an elevator, and you have a male celebrity attacking a female celebrity in an elevator. And footage from both was leaked on TMZ. And Linekin says that the incident with Knowles' sister was not news, but the incident with the football player was news. So that's kind of a weird double, that's kind of a weird angle to take, It just seems like you're biased against one gender. And then she also complained that I think that, there was that Sony email leaks that year, and they found out that like women were being paid less than men, and she was trying to make it out as some kind of like sexism thing. But I was like, Amy Pascal, a woman, was in charge of Sony Pictures at the time. You can't really claim that that's sexism, especially since Pascal was like gave an interview where she said, well, like I'm not gonna offer people higher salaries. You have to know what you're worth and bargain with me, which makes perfect sense. So, like I said, I don't see Linekin as particularly unbiased in this case. And I mean, she even said during the interviews like that the whole argument now was like who gets to be mainstream and who gets to be marginalized in video games, which seems like, again, it's one of those really strange ideas. Ideally, you shouldn't marginalize anyone. It should be welcome to everybody. But yeah.
So it's interesting too because I went through. You linked me two of the interviews, and
Yeah.
the first one I listened to, I took notes about everything that happened. The second one I started to
Yeah.
listen to, and I thought it was the exact same interview. I'm like, oh, this is the same one. You
Yeah.
sent me it twice, and you're like, no. You said no, but there was like one or two like words that were different. But I'm like, oh, it's the same interview, and you're like, no, she just did the exact same thing 3 times. So
Yeah,
let's talk
exactly.
about the specific claims that she and the
Yeah.
host make. Okay.
Okay, sure. Let's go over it. Yes.
Okay. So the host says, I think this was this Stephen Quinn, the first one you sent me.
Yeah, I believe Stephen Quinn. Stephen Quinn's the abbreviated interview. Like the other interview with Dave White and what's called Alan Neal. What happened? They had like a little section for banter, but they actually put in a little section where they could actually have like banter or like off the cuff stuff. But Quinn's version is just like straight. It's just the interview. So, but yeah, let's go. Let's not get distracted.
Okay.
Just go ahead.
All right. So I put CBC host says that the GamerGate movement is composed of video game fans who have, quote, stepped up their threats against female game developers and critics who question the traditions of the gaming world, end quote. That's what the host, not Kim, but the host said. I think it was Steven, but I'm not 100%, so I'm not going to say.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's Steven, yes.
So
yeah,
what do we think
Yeah.
of framing things in this way?
Well, I mean, where do you even start? Like, no one is. I don't. Like I said, it's just. I mean, GamerGate started really about ethics in journalism and about cronyism in the video game industry. No one has any problems with making video games more inclusive towards women. The problem is that there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. Just to give the listeners a specific example, like when Lego was trying to figure out a way to market their stuff to girls, right? I think they spent how many years in research trying to figure out what made girls tick, what would appeal to them, and then they designed a Lego line around that, and it was successful because they knew what they were doing. What gamers were objecting to wasn't like, challenging the norms. It's basically you had like feminists and progressives trying to pop culturally appropriate existing properties and twist them to suit them. So yeah, that's completely off. They basically, like, the CBC is basically going with the narratives that the video game journalists were using, nothing that was completely grounded in reality.
Now, after this claim, Kim talks about how Nathan Grayson didn't review Depression Quest and implies that because there was no review, there could be no conflict of interest. The CBC host then says, quote, sounds petty and juvenile, unquote, about the Zoe Quinn affair, the Zoe Quinn post with Eric
Yes.
Tony.
Yeah.
Kim says, it's become almost, well, this isn't a direct quote, but paraphrasing, it's become almost a culture war. Says there are some legitimate ethical issues.
Nice of her to admit that.
Then Kim says that she thinks that gamers were mad because Quinn was a female game developer and made a non-traditional game about depression. I don't know where they're getting this idea from.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, people were mocking the game for basically being like a glorified choose your own adventure book, essentially. It was basically like clicking on this and this, and clicking on this answer, clicking on that answer, not having this answer available because you're depressed. So, it really wasn't anything mind-blowing. You have more complicated dialogue trees in older RPGs. It's really not all that mind-blowing.
Yeah, I don't know where this idea though that gamers were upset because of this though. One, her game came out a year before GamerGate, and two, she did try to false flag this. Remember, she tried to false flag the Wizard Chan community and falsely accuse
Oh
them of
yeah, yeah.
harassing
Oh
her.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
but
she totally did that.
yeah, she did this in 2013. So like
Yeah.
maybe that's like the quote unquote hate that they're referring to, but it sounds like they're trying to make it seem like gamers are mad at her because she made a non-traditional game. Um,
Well,
but that's not
I
true.
think no, but no, sorry, just sorry to interject, but just to add to that, what I like, I'm not 100% sure about the timeline, but what I think they're referring to in that case is that if I remember my basic timeline correctly, Robin Williams actually died around the time of Gamergate, I think. Let me just verify that one. Let me just verify that. Like, when did Robin? Let me just double check that. Sorry. Yeah, Robin Williams. Yeah, August 11th, 2014. If I don't remember the specifics, but I believe, like, like Robin Williams suffered from depression and like other problems, right? I believe that she used his death to try and like market herself and the game, and that's what really pissed people off. That's like, I think that's part of what they're getting into there.
Well, if you want to send that to me, you can. We can go over it at a different time, unless you want to go over it on air. But
Yeah. No. I'm just saying that no. But I'll look up the details and send it to you. No problem. I'm just saying. I'm just adding that to the context. I think that's what they're referring to. As for Zoe Quinn, like framing Wizard Chan, yeah, that was proven. There was a Know Your Meme interview with Hot Wheels.
yeah,
I a short time after.
I've covered Quinn's many escapades in great detail. We don't have to go over them all now, unless you want to.
Oh no, absolutely not. I'm just sorry. I'm just adding that for like adding that for the audience's sake, so they know like what we're referring to. But yes.
All right, Kim says gamers opposed Quinn's style of game because they, this is a direct quote, didn't appreciate social justice warriors trying to make the gaming world more inclusive. They didn't like Quinn's game. They resented the attention she got. Then, when she thought she got it hypocritically through sex, some idiots decided to punish her by posting her address online and sending her death threats. That's what Kim says to the interviewer.
Yes. Oh boy. We've already gone through like part of that. Like I said, I think if gamers were angry about anything about Quinn's game, they were mocking it for it being low quality and maybe taking advantage of Robin Williams' death to market herself. There's that part. For the death threats, I think we went over, like, there's some suspicion that she may have set that up herself. Of course, we can't prove it. As for the Actually, just to get back to one thing you mentioned earlier about the review, this is actually something I mentioned in the paper, like in the complaint I filed with the Canadian government about CBC's biased coverage. I basically explained where the whole, like, one thing you'll notice about Kim Leinekin and the CBC and other journalists, right? They basically are fixated on the term, like, Zoe Quinn traded sex with Nathan Grayson and other people for good reviews of her game or something like that. They're very focused on that specific wording, because there was some confusion early in Gamergate because people were throwing around certain terms liberally. Like, for example, they were throwing around the term review liberally, or like coverage, which you usually would equate as being identical, but it wasn't. Like, they're right that Nathan Grayson never reviewed Depression Quest, but he did like cover it or mention it positively or basically drop some publicity for it. So that's where the whole telephone game came, when it came to explaining what exactly happened. But the CBC remained hyper focused on the classical notion of review. So they could say, oh, there was no review, therefore there was no conflict of interest, therefore the gamers are lying and operating under false pretenses, and that's absolutely false.
Yeah, this is
so
this
that's,
is
that's
the whole review lie that they promote. Um,
Yeah.
that comes from Stephen Totillo mostly. I'm sure that there might have been like random people on Twitter who said it too. You run into it in the wild every once in a while. People who don't know anything about the situation, or they know a little bit and they don't know all the details. But Stephen Totillo was like, oh well, he didn't review her game, so it's fine. That's what he said in his official editorial response to the controversy at the time. And then that's repeated in almost every, not just the CBC, but Wikipedia. Wikipedia says that there was no review, therefore it was a conspiracy theory and there was no conflict of interest. Wikipedia actually says that.
I
Because
actually
they cite
like.
PC Gamer, I believe it is,
Well, yeah. Here's like just to give you an
which says
example,
that.
right? Well, just to give you an example, like I actually went over. This is something that is beyond like maybe the scope of the detail we want to go into. But what I basically did is I did like I checked and I checked like I checked what happened right after like the what's called the conspiracy thing blew up, right? And I checked how various people like like Matt Jarbo and Total Biscuit, and how everyone covered it, right? And you can see their like I think what is it? Matt Jarbo covers it. Raises the question of how much Zoe Quinn's coverage for Depression Quest lately has been from actual merit or from people she was effing to get it. I think there was a blog post, like a blog post by let's see, a female gamer named KC said, "Thanks Zoe for enforcing the idea that women can get anywhere in the game dev industry unless can't get anywhere in the game dev industry unless they f journalists for good reviews." And then Mr. Meadowcore basically said something like, "What is it? Let me see. Let me see. People, Quinn is having Quinn like. Let me see. Sorry, I'm just trying to read it here. Quinn is taking down videos because of people she slept with that she cheated on with during her relationship with Aaron Joni, who they are, and specifically what can do for her as an entrepreneur. And when the people Quinn is having an affair with happen to be able to help her career through her actions related to the industry, then becomes a piece of public discourse and importance." And basically, yeah, and Total Biscuit said like the long and short of it is that Zoe Quinn, the developer of Depression Quest, is being accused of exploiting the nepotism that tends to plague this industry by getting a bunch of favorable coverage from people she has supposedly been sleeping with. And this was my explanation for these inconsistencies. It wasn't that I actually found an explanation that was that is the correct one. It's not that gamers were like you and I know this, but it wasn't that gamers were throwing around false accusations. It's that when you had you had people spreading it around, the whole stuff like coverage, review, publicity, it all got mixed together, and people started confusing one for the other without having seen the details. So it wasn't out of maliciousness. It was just like
Well, and
like I said, it was like
there were a number of other conflicts of interest that came out at the same time, including some involving reviews involving Nathan Grayson, I believe, right? With Sound
oh
Self
yeah, oh yeah,
with Robin or Not,
oh yeah,
which came out
yeah.
within like the same 2 week period as the Zoe Quinn thing, and also involved Nathan Grayson, in which he, I believe, I better double check this. I believe he actually reviewed Sound Self.
Well, the thing with Robin Arnott was he was a what's it called? He was a night games curator at IndieCade when Depression Quest received increased visibility after it was selected to be part of the Night Games Festival. I think in the IndieCade 2013. And while nothing, let's say no incriminating documentation or statements have surfaced, there was the suspicion that the game only became part of the Night Games Festival because she got preferential treatment from Arnott, who it is known she was sleeping with at some point. So that's the thing. Like what I'm saying is that this is one of the tactics that the CBC like using, and as you said, other journalistic outlets. They said they fixated on the idea that Zoe Quinn slept with video game journalists to get to get good reviews of her game.
Okay.
And when this exact phrasing, and because this did not quite happen, they used that since this exact phrasing was not accurate, they used this as a way to discredit GamerGate. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Sorry.
And like you said,
quick. He did not review our Robin Arnott's game, but he did write 6 articles promoting him over a 3-month period. and they
Oof.
might have been friends. I defend Grayson a little bit here because it's not 100% proven that they were friends. It's just really, really, really likely because if you look at the situation where he talks about how he's hugging him and how they're friends on Facebook, and he writes these 6 articles over a 3-month period, and they're both in the same friend group as Zoe Quinn, which is kind of sus.
Yeah,
But it's not 100% proven that Robin or not Nathan Grayson are friends. It just seems like they are.
yeah, they're definitely like, I would say
But there
like
was a
acquaint at
review.
least.
There was a review controversy though in the lead up to it, and there was the Danielle Rindau Polygon review
Yes,
in the same 2-week period.
I'm.
But anyway,
Yeah. Mhm.
so is there anything else about these 3 identical interviews that you want to discuss?
Well, I think we've covered it all. As I said, I don't know what I have talked to Archon from the what's called from the Escapist, right? And he has said that there is, just to be, like, to be fully honest here, there are occasions like when you're doing fluff interviews where you might structure it this way. But when you're doing something that's controversial, I think that's kind of a point where you shouldn't pull this kind of crap, because the optics are really bad for this. The only other thing I can add to this is that the interviewer you mentioned, Stephen Quinn, he covered Gamergate several times, several different people, and what's up? And the funniest thing is he once had Anita Sarkeesian on his show. He eventually got to her, right? And then it was absolutely hilarious because he even said, he did not believe, he was like totally on her side, and he said Gamergate was allegedly about video game journalism, and she basically made this Chewbacca noise, and she went off on him, and and she basically like smacked him down, like, for that verbally. And it was like I was laughing so hard when I listened to that, because it was just like, I mean, he was like one of her biggest simps. He got it from her. It was hilarious. And that particular podcast, like that particular interview of her, was like gold mine, because he actually said, "Did you ever talk to any of your critics?" And then she basically corrected him and said, "I don't have," like, she basically said, "I don't have. They're not critics. They're harassers." He said, "I want to be very clear on that. I have no interest in talking to them." So basically, she's implying that she has no legitimate critics, only harassers, and that was just that was wild.
Yeah, the one I actually that I documented all the notes for, that was actually the Dave White one, I believe, because this
Yeah.
specific this caught me at the time.
Hmm.
It's so weird and unprofessional, and maybe a miscarriage of journalism, perhaps, likely, that Dave White,
Yeah.
when they talk about Adam Baldwin and they play the clip from him, he
Yeah.
just says, "Just a second, I have to make a note to myself. Alec Baldwin is a jackass." And then
Yeah.
Kim corrects him and says Adam Baldwin. So this guy, his response is to immediately say, "Oh, this person's a jackass." And
Yeah.
and
It's real
he's the host of the
professionalism.
Well, hang on. He's the host of the interview. He's
Yeah.
calling the person a jackass. He doesn't even know the person's name, and he mixes him up with a different celebrity with a similar name. It just seems extraordinarily, yes, not impartial, and also, like, why is he even saying this if he doesn't even know who he is?
I, I your guess is as good as mine. I mean, there's a, there's like a, you can. I think it's a testament to the kind of people that the CBC allows on air. Like, it's not the only one. They had another guy who was on air. He called him like a right wing nut job or something like that. And it was one of the one of the interviewees, and he's like, "Can I say that on air?" And then I think it's Alan Neal who actually was part of that thing. And he said, "As long as you're sure, as long as you make sure it's your opinion, and it's not ours, But yeah, it's like, it's just a testament to the kind of people that they have on air. Like, the CBC really seems to hate conservatives and right wingers and anyone like like anyone like Adam Baldwin. It just really, it's just, I don't know. Like I said, there's nothing more I could say. It's ridiculously unprofessional of them.
All right. So there's other coverage as well. Do you want to discuss some of that? What do you think
No,
is the
no,
worst example? The worst example, aside from this one, of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's coverage of GamerGate?
oh, there's actually two. Uh, two that come to mind. One was one did not involve direct Gamergate directly, but it was never mentioned during it, but it was one of the interviews that what's his name? Neil McDonald did with Neil McDonald did with Brianna Wu, I believe. Or was it let me just verify. Just give me a second, let me just verify. I believe yes, it's Neil McDonald he did with Brianna Wu. What happened was that he had her talking about all the harassment she'd received, and basically what happens is she said that they introduced a segment and they said at one point one of like Wu's critics said he was on his way to kill her. And then they aired an excerpt from the Jace Connors incident where he flipped his car and then he went on that insane rant like about how he crashed his car while going to challenge Brianna Wu to like a race or something like that. You remember that incident, right?
Yeah, I know more about Brianna Wu than I'd like.
Yeah, okay, but for the people here who are not aware, there was a guy named Jace Connors. He had like he basically he was promoting himself as part of this dysfunctional family, right? And what happens is it turned out that the whole thing was basically like an act. And he was like an extreme comedian or something like that. And what happens is that at some point, like I think it was I forget I think it was what is it called? What are they called? Like Kiwi Farms, they eventually became suspicious and they outed him, right? And it was revealed that the whole Jace Connors thing was a hoax. I think his real name is Jan Krankowski or something like that. And he basically, the jig was up. And the whole, like all of this was just a crazy act. And this happened something like 2.5 months before this CBC story aired. And the whole hoax was covered by at least 21 different news outlets for varying sizes. So this was a known hoax. But the CBC went on air with a segment with Brianna Wu and just basically said, oh, one of her critics said he was on his way to kill her, and they aired a segment of this proven hoax to illustrate that point. And I was like, this is, do you not have fact checkers? Like this was absolutely insane. And like, I like, I'm just kind of speechless by the whole, just remembering it because that was that. The other incident that I remember that was particularly bad was, I should mention that this was on one of CBC's flagship news shows, like the National. So it was like a really big one. And the other incident that I'm thinking of actually also occurred on the National. What happened was that they did a segment on GamerGate.
Well, we can just pull it up, right? It's in the archive. Do you mind if I show?
Yeah. It should be in the National. Like
which date?
Yeah, you can. Let me check. Let me just go for. Let me just check. I think it was November. Hold on. I'm looking for it. I'm looking at the list here. Just give me a second. Oh God, where is it? The National Gamer. Yeah, it's what's on November 13th. The National Gamergate sparks conversation on gaming culture. Yeah, what happened here was that just to give you an introduction, let me just find that. The introduction basically said that when this I'm not going to name her specifically, even though she's in one of the thumbnails there, but basically the CBC stated that when this young woman made a tweet of support for Zoe Quinn on Twitter, she was immediately dogpiled by Gamergate, and she was sent rape and death threats, and the usual shtick, right? The actual truth is that it's a bit more complicated than that, and they left out like they made a very important omission. This is going into a bit of detail, but I'll try and set this up as quickly as possible. At around the time this incident is alleged to have occurred, I think a couple of days before, there was a Twitter troll named News Bureau who, he used like a picture of the Happy Wanderer as his avatar, so you kind of know what he's about, right? He was basically an online troll who just caused trouble. And at the time, what he did was he was spamming Twitter with, the nude pictures that Zoe Quinn had from her days as a model, as an alt pinup model, right?
Yeah, I've interviewed.
He was doing
Nasrallah.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what happened was that both GamerGate and Anti-GamerGate were trying to shut this idiot down, right? And what happened was that Zoe Quinn was kind of like frustrated and vented her frustration. And this woman, right? This young woman basically said that, like she was tweeting at Zoe Quinn. She said, "Hey, I'm sorry this is happening to you. Do you want to talk? Maybe we can, maybe I can cheer you up, And what happened was that, she started ranting and yelling about GamerGate and how it was all their fault. And then I don't know who it was. Someone sent her one of Quinn's nude pics, like basically tweeted it at her, and she basically lost her mind. She basically said this guy was guilty of sexual harassment. It was like a sex crime had been committed. This guy was a sex offender just for tweeting this nude picture at her. And like, she just went ballistic, and she spent the next 48 minutes attacking GamerGate supporters directly, calling them every name under the sun, hurling insults, accusing them of being rapists, of being, like misogynist, sexist, whatever. She spent like almost an hour doing this. Nonstop verbal abuse and like attacks. And of course, the GamerGate supporters, they gave as good as they got. And she even argued with like one or two GamerGate supporters who were like sexual assault victims themselves. And this is the incident that CBC said, like, reduced to made a tweet of support for Zoe Quinn. Somehow verbally abusing GamerGate supporters for an hour was somehow left out, which I think is a pretty important part of the story to include. So it's that kind of stuff. You just see that kind of stuff. But this is a recurring theme that you see with a lot of the CBC coverage of GamerGate. You basically see you have a female guest or a left-leaning guest or a progressive guest go on the show. They are basically given free reign to say anything they want and are never challenged, are never asked for any proof, are never, nothing. Never asked any questions to, check their veracity. It's just accepted that they're right. And this is a big problem. And this is in dramatic contrast to what you see when the CBC unofficially and the one time officially tried to interview GamerGate supporters. They are grilled. They are basically they are asked to like basically justify the harassment, explain the harassment, all this stuff. It's basically loaded question after loaded question, and it's really unprofessional. There's no other way to put it.
Where's this example of when they interviewed a GamerGate person?
Well, there are two unofficial instances of them. They were by one of you're probably aware of. They're earlier in the month. They're much earlier in the timeline though. Let me just check the 1 second. Let me just check the thing. If you go up, okay.
Jennifer Daw.
What? Yeah.
Unaired.
This was
unaired.
It was never aired. Like John Bowman did a pre-interview with Jennifer Daw,
I'm
right?
interviewing her
And
too.
he tried, and he ran it past her, like like he ran it past like his superior, and his superior like nixed it. He didn't want to go ahead with it. So that was he put it up on SoundCloud. And the other one was he actually interviewed Jenny Barrage. And that one is really like he interviewed Jenny Barrage. You can see it's on October 21st.
Oh, hang on.
Sorry, no problem. October 21st. What's it called? John Bowen interview with Jenny.
Also unaired.
Basically, yeah, also unaired. And you should, if you really want to make your draw trap, listen to this. He basically was like with Jennifer Daw, it was kind of balanced. Like he took, he did ask a few loaded questions, but he tried to be respectful. But that went completely out the window with Barrage. Like with Jenny Barrage, like he was basically like attacking her. Like he was basically like going off on her, and he was acting really outraged and acting like a Woo simp or apologist. And he's like, he made statements like Woo was attacked because of Gamergate. There's no other reason Gamergate or anyone would go after her. And it's like, I mean, if you know Woo, you know that she has a tendency to get on people's bad sides. So, that's totally ridiculous. The only official, just to add the third one, the only official interview with a CB, like with a Gamergate supporter that was on the CBC and actually aired was I'm trying to check here. Let me check here. It was with Alan Neal. I'm trying to check. Let me check where this is now. I'm trying to. Yeah, it was. No, you're not going to get it. Go. Let me just look here. I'm just trying to check here. Coding is Gamergate's first. I'm looking. Let's see. Maintaining. That's not it. On a gamer. I think it's Gamergate Revisited, also from October 21st. I think that's the one. Yeah, that one. October 21st. Gamergate Revisited. All in a day. I believe that's the one. Yes. What this one is about? He interviewed a man named Mike Desjardins. Gamers might be actually more familiar with him under the name Mike Mood. He released what's it called? He released that game. Let me just make sure I got the name right. I always get it wrong. Hold on. Bendy and the Ink Machine. He was the creator of like Bendy and the Ink Machine. So they interviewed him, but you can see, like I said, Alan Neal interviewed Linnekin. He interviewed like three other guests that same day after Linnekin's interview, were also about Gamergate. And then a couple of days later, and this is, like I said, he's the only one who kind of came close to ever trying balanced coverage, which isn't saying much, but then he interviewed like an actual Gamergate supporter. So, but you can see the tone is different. Like I said, when the interviewers were allowed to say anything they wanted, make any claims they wanted, however unsubstantiated, while, like Desjardins was pressed, to basically justify Gamergate or answer for it, or, he was giving a bunch of leading or loaded questions and things like that. And he actually did pretty well, I would say, the guy. So, yeah, that's, for the record, you can actually listen. So those are the only three that I can find. Everything else is just like, everyone's like anti-Gamergate. It's always Sarkeesian. It's always Woo. It's always some other like anti-Gamergate figure. So,
Yeah, it is interesting too that of the three, two of them weren't even aired. I mean, here you have Jennifer Daw, right? I'm interviewing her. She's literally a female game developer who works in the industry and has a very different opinion on Gamergate than, say, Brianna Wu. So you'd think that this would be like a pretty important voice to hear out. Like, okay, let's hear out different perspectives, but they don't air hers at all.
Yeah, that was
Or Barage's.
unfortunately what. yeah, like unfortunately, like one angry gamer is down, but basically, I believe that part of the reason that that interview actually got put up is because what's it called, because they asked, like, they what's it called, they contacted Bowman and asked about it, and he put it up. Both, by the way, those two interviews, the SoundCloud interviews, they're both gone. Bowman deleted them from his SoundCloud like 4 or 5 years ago. My archive is like probably one of the only places you'll actually be able to find them.
Okay, so
So
do
I,
you?
I even, yeah.
No, go ahead. Finish
Go
your
ahead.
point because we're
Sorry.
gonna be moving on to the next
No, no.
segment.
Oh no, no. I'm just saying that like it was funny because Jennifer Dahl actually asked for a copy of it because she didn't even have one herself. So I I was the one who gave it to her for her own archives. But go ahead.
All right, so they have this long. Well, first off, before we move on to the next segment, are
Yeah.
there any other articles or interviews or anything you want to discuss relating to the Canadian Broadcasting Company? Because I know you have thousands, you have like fucking dozens of these things. So, is there anything else you want
Well,
to go over while we're on air for the book?
not um I'm trying to think. Like there are there was actually a what's there's actually they actually did like a what is it? They actually, perhaps most noteworthy for your, like for your book. We can go over this like afterwards or anything like that. What might be the most useful stuff, because a lot, like I basically cataloged every mention of Gamergate, whether like however important or not it was. But they had a documentary about women, like the gaming, like misogyny and sexism in the gaming industry. It's further down. I think it's from 2016. You would have to check. Let me just check it in my own logs here.
It was
Hold on.
2015. If you're talking about the one that started filming in 2012.
It's not that one. Let me find it. It's called. The title varied a bit. It was from 2016, November 30th, 2016. It's called Ideas: The Dangerous Game, Gamergate, and the Alt Right. And I mean, they mentioned Gamergate in the intro, and they actually played like a part of a speech by Richard Spencer, like that neo-Nazi and white nationalist, in the beginning to kind of set the mood. And I'm like, gee, there's no bias here at all, is there?
Oh, hang on. You said
It's
Dangerous
like
Game.
the Dangerous Game. It's 2016, like November 30th, 2016.
I don't think I'll go through all of this.
No, no,
51
no,
pages for the first PDF file.
no. That's no, no. You don't have to go through it. I'm just saying that no, no. Oh no, you don't have to go through any of this stuff.
Oh, I know. I'm
These
giving people something to look at while we talk. Go ahead.
no. It's fine. No, no. To explain, what's in that thing is basically a bunch of paper. Like they had guests interviewed for this thing, right? And I basically said, well, when I was originally compiling this archive to give people something to complain to the CBC about, I said, well, better dig up all the articles that were mentioned, right? Or at least that the academics there wrote, papers that they wrote. So I just dumped it all in the folder so someone would have a frame of reference. You absolutely do not have to read the girl. Like even I don't think I've been able to stomach all of these articles. I just put all the stuff that was even tangentially mentioned into that. Like, I mean, one of the funnier things is like one of the interviewees in this for this segment was a video game researcher who was actually, I think she was in charge of Arnita Sarkeesian's master's thesis. So that might be an interesting angle to look at for anyone who's curious. Jennifer Jensen, I think her name was.
And just a heads up, I'm not sure if you're aware, but if it's not in the interview, if we don't talk about it
Yeah,
here or you don't put it in the
yeah,
text interview that you're going to do after,
yeah,
um, it's not going to be in the book.
yeah. That's fine. That's
Okay,
fine.
just so you're aware. So like anything that's not covered, it's not in the book.
Got it.
Unless I bring it up like in a later interview or something.
That's perfect. That's perfect. No problem.
Okay, so the Canadian Broadcasting Company covers Gamergate. They run with a pretty one-sided narrative.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even air the interviews that they do with pro Gamergate people except one time.
Yeah.
And you think that they're not doing a very good job and that there's this really suspicious stuff and how they're covering it in some cases where they're having 3 interviews that are almost exactly word for word the same from 4 different people. Seems kind of unlikely that this would occur. Um,
Yeah.
you talk with them. Well, first off, do you file a complaint with the ombudsman first, or do you speak with your member of parliament?
Um, that's a. I spoke, if I remember correctly, I did, I did speak with my local member of parliament to try and ask for advice on what to do. He did give me some. I did also file a complaint with the ombudsman about it. But the problem with the ombudsman is that Enkin was also biased. Like the what's called the CBC ombudsman Esther Enkin was also biased, and she was basically quoting. It's kind of unbelievable, like some of the stuff she was using to justify this. Like, for example, like she repeated like the lie that like that Nathan Grace, like not Nathan Grace, that Aaron Joni like accused Zoe Quinn of sleeping with other people for reviews in the Zoe post, which never happened. He did not make that accusation. Some people surmised it from a phrasing, and he even issued a correction a few days later. So just to eliminate that train of thought, but she basically cited that as fact. She also claims that comments like comments against women can be violent, which is ridiculous. Like comments themselves are not violence. They can provoke violence, they can encourage violence, but they are not by themselves violent. But yes, I did. But to answer your question, yes, I did both. I tried contacting Esther Enkin, and then I tried contacting my member of parliament, I believe, when I was not thoroughly satisfied with how that went. But yeah, it's a matter of escalation. Like you have to, the way the CBC complaint system works is that the first thing you're supposed to do is you're supposed to write to the people, like who to the journalists who wrote the piece first, and they're supposed to issue a response. And if you're not satisfied with that response, you can escalate it to the ombudsman. And if you're not happy with the way the ombudsman is, then you can like escalate it to the Canadian government, because I think, what's it called? Let me just make sure I always get what's it called? The Canadian Radio, Television, and Telecommunications Commission. Uh, they're like, basically, if you don't like what the CBC is doing, you would complain to them. And that's what I did. Like, I basically, me and other people, like every time they would basically slander Gamergate or make questionable assumptions, we tried filing a complaint. Except that Enkin basically got tired of, of trying to justify the CBC stuff, and she basically said, "We are going to ignore any future complaints you file." So basically, that became the end of that. And at some point, I escalated it to the CRTC, and they demanded that she respond. Like, I filed a complaint with the CRTC, and they basically they told the ombudsman to respond to their the complaint request, and she ignored them. Like, she literally ignored them for years. So you basically have, unless you have a really strong, one thing I learned from all this is that unless you have a really strong lobbying group behind you, it would be extremely poor optics to basically ignore you. Like the CBC can basically play this game of continuing to badmouth you and then declare you a vexatious complainant, or you're filing all these complaints and we're just going to ignore you from now on. And then they can just do what they want. So yeah, the system is bad, I would say here.
All right. Um, I'm not screen sharing right now, but I'm going to in a minute. I'm not on
Yeah.
the stream. Okay, so I want to go over your complaint, your official ombudsman complaint, real quick, and the response to it. I'd read over this, most of it,
Uh,
before we aired. Don't
uh,
worry. Don't worry. We're not on. It's not on stream. You're only seeing. You're seeing part of it, but yeah. Okay, so
okay.
I'm gonna read part of it before we go, and then I'm gonna screen share. Okay.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
Yeah, I
As
know.
long as the part. Yeah. We know.
Yeah, drawing more
Yeah.
attention to it's not going to be a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
The complainant, redacted, objected to the characterization of Gamergate in an interview about a documentary on misogyny in the gaming community. It's best to be nuanced in describing the term. The host's phrasing fell short, but the interview did not violate policy. All right, now this is one of the ombudsman complaints you filed. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and then we'll screen share. Okay.
Sure, not a problem. Yes, this was indeed one of the complaints I filed. This is actually the one with Stephen Quinn. He was the one whose interview with Kim Linnikin you actually checked first. So he was one of them.
Complaint. You were concerned that statements about the online movement known as GamerGate in the context of an interview on the Vancouver-based afternoon show On the Coast about a documentary on misogyny in the gaming community were false and misrepresented the movement and repeated, quote, unfounded allegations, unquote. You pointed out that the host of the program, Stephen Quinn, said GamerGate was, of course, when anonymous players threatened to rape and murder female game developers, when there is no evidence to support them. You also objected to Mr. Quinn's statement that GamerGate was the full extent of the misogyny, dot, 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 unquote.
Yeah.
You see a persistent pattern of portrayal of what you call a consumer revolt in a bad light. You believe that the women who have made complaints about Gamergate are unreliable witnesses, and that there is no proof that anyone involved in Gamergate indulges in harassment or threats to women gamers. You characterize the association of Gamergate with harassment and misogyny as a false and inherently biased narrative. You included comments and correspondence about other CBC mentions of Gamergate as part of your complaint. And then there's the manager's response, which I guess do you mind if I read all of this? Because I think it's actually important for the book, and I think it's important for the audience.
Sure, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Or do you want to read it? I mean,
no, go right ahead. Okay. No problem. I have no problem with it.
The director of programming for radio in British Columbia, Lorna Haber, replied to your concerns. She told you that the interview was about a documentary airing at the DOXA Festival in Vancouver. She added that the film entitled GTFO, Get the F Out, was not about Gamergate and had in fact been shot 2 years before the Gamergate hashtag appeared on the scene. The documentary, she told you, was about, quote, some female gamers and the harassment they say they face. She told you in the course of the interview, no one woman was featured nor mentioned by name, so your contention that some of the women associated with Gamergate have been discredited are not relevant in this context. She explained that the reference to Gamergate was in one question because the documentary included a postscript addressing the controversy. Mr. Quinn asked Miss Sun Higginson, the director, whether Gamergate was something she might have anticipated given all the interviews she did with female gamers. The listener is left with the impression the women profiled in the film were not representing sides or camps, but simply were individuals sharing their experience in the gaming world. Mr. Quinn did try to put the issue of Gamergate into some context for the listener, describing it as, quote, when anonymous players threaten to rape and murder female game developers, unquote. You took exception to that phrase, saying there is no evidence linking Gamergate supporters to such incidents. Again, the interview was not intended to explore Gamergate, and the phrase was intended to remind people quickly what it was about. So the question being asked made sense. Okay, so
yeah, you can. I mean, you burst out laughing, but that's what I'm saying. It's like this is like one of the excuses that CBC gave is like, oh, we mentioned Gamergate, but since this piece is not actually about Gamergate, we don't have to address it in a fair and balanced fashion. And you could see, like, you were laughing when you were reading the last part. You could see it's completely ridiculous, the claim. It's like you were laughing at this. It's like not intended to support it. It's like it was intended to remind people. Yeah, that's some reminder, isn't it?
Well, so the interview wasn't about Gamergate, but Mr. Quinn decides to throw in this whole side part about Gamergate for no reason, and he says that Gamergate is about. Well, so direct quote: when Gamergate is when anonymous players threatened to rape and murder female game developers. That's what he, an official employee of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, said that Gamergate is about. in his
Yes.
official capacity,
Yes. That is a direct quote.
with no additional context, no evidence, nothing. Just
No, he just said like Gamergate, of course, was like of the of course when anonymous players threatened to rape. Yes, he did say that. That's the verbatim phrasing. That's exactly what he said.
all right. Let's continue. She also responded to your concern that you heard Mr. Quinn say Gamergate was the full extent of the misogyny, quote unquote. She explained that what he said was different. What he said was, if you thought Gamergate was the full extent of the misogyny, stay tuned for more. They have two very different meanings. The statement made by Mr. Quinn indicated the story they would be doing would go beyond one specific controversy that became known as Gamergate.
Yeah, it's like it's splitting hairs at some point. You know, like the first one was bad enough. Like,
Well, it's not impartial because like he's obviously implying that Gamergate supports misogyny to a high degree.
yeah, exactly. Like he was like one of the worst ones. Like I think he's did at least I don't know how many pieces he did on Gamergate or like where he mentioned it or took like pot shots at it. I think it's at least 3. I don't have the exact number memorized, but yeah, it was at least 3. So yeah, he definitely had it out for us.
You have here's the official review from the ombudsman. What was her name?
Esther Enkin.
Esther Incan. Okay. You have expressed concern on several occasions that the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation has adopted only one narrative about Gamergate, and that the narrative is false. The narrative you consider true is that Gamergate represents a consumer movement of people concerned about corruption and cronyism in the gaming industry and the video game journalists who cover it. I will repeat that I have written in at least 3 other reviews. You may
It
claim that
wasn't just me.
Gamergate is a movement that stands for ethics in gaming. It is hard to know what a movement is, what it stands for, and who speaks for it when it is actually a hashtag, a Twitter name that can be claimed by whoever is using it. That is associated with the harassment and negative treatment of women is a fact. That's a bold claim from her. It has become a kind of shorthand reference for something that is more complicated.
Yeah, you can see the problem with her reasoning here because what happens is the intended meaning of a hashtag is kind of like let's separate like there's several problems here. First of all, there's a difference between a hashtag and a movement, right? Basically, she's trying to conflate the two. Like the two are not like there's Gamergate the movement, which was about this, and then Gamergate the hashtag, which anyone can use. And then there's what Gamergate was actually about, whereas like as opposed to what people like her associated with it. So it's kind of like it's ridiculous circular logic. She's basically saying, well, Gamergate's associated with all these negative things. And why are they associated with all these negative things? Because people like Stephen Quinn at the CBC are associated with negative things. So it's this really weird, disconnect, It's like, yes, Gamergate has a negative reputation because you and other people have contributed to this negative reputation with these statements. So she's acting like, oh, it has a negative reputation, must be something to it. But just you can go on reading if you want, but you get what I mean. It's just crazy.
Well, and it's interesting too that she says that nobody can define what Gamergate is, essentially,
Yeah,
right?
that's the thing.
That's what she. Wait, hang on. Let me say.
Yeah,
She says that nobody can define what Gamergate is.
Mm-hmm.
But then she defends Mr. Quinn, or well, I guess technically management defended her, not the ombudsman, though that might come up later. The managers at the CBC defended Mr. Quinn's statement that Gamergate is about when anonymous players threaten to rape and murder female game developers. So Mr. Quinn does define it, but she says it's undefinable. But then she also later says it's a fact, quote unquote, that Gamergate is associated with the harassment and negative treatment of women. So how is
Yeah,
she able to define it? How is Mr. Quinn able to define it? But when you offer an explanation that doesn't 100% agree with them, it's
yeah, that's a
undefinable. There's no explanation. We can't define it. It's too complicated. Seems kind
yeah,
of like a
exactly.
cop
I
out.
mean, yeah, exactly. No, it's totally a cop out. You can see there's massive holes in her logic. Like you can like it's like you said, she can define she and everyone in the CBC can tell it's like being I don't know how to describe this. It's like the whole setup is basically as if a political party like the only way a political party could be defined was by its opponents. That would make absolutely no sense. Because but that's what they're doing here. It's exactly what you said. I mean, the best thing to do would be if you want to know what Gamergate's about, well, you should ask the supporters what it's about. That seems like a really basic thing to do. And yet they don't do that. It's like you said, they just say, "Oh, it's too complicated. You can't it's hard to say what it's about." But then they don't hesitate to define it in the way they want. So, yeah.
Continuing, Miss Haber told you that this interview was not about Gamergate, so there was no need to go into any detail or explore it more closely. In one way, she is correct. But as I have stated before, given the level of controversy, to state that Gamergate is an online movement that harasses and threatens women is too unequivocal. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's journalistic policy demands clarity in its use of language. I strongly suggest that when harassment of women gamers is discussed, the language should be very precise and nuanced. Like many controversial issues, both sides point to definitive facts or narratives to prove their point. This is far too amorphous for that to be the case. A mention that there are people who understand Gamergate to be something different, or saying it is associated with the harassment of women, would be a more well, that's sorry, I'll finish. Would be a more precise or accurate way of talking about it.
Oh. Hello?
So it does seem like at least the ombudsman does recognize that they did fail to present both sides, but
Yeah.
even her suggestion though that they should phrase things as associated with the harassment of women. I think that that's still pretty
Yeah, yeah, it's
biased.
yeah, it's a total cop out. It's a total cop out.
There was a single interview with a woman who had made a film about the experience of women who had been threatened and harassed in the gaming world. The broader context is a culture war within the gaming world. It is not some mainstream media conspiracy that women are attacked, harassed, and made to feel unwelcome. Of course, that doesn't mean that every single gamer is a misogynist, but it is certainly a legitimate journalistic exercise to have interviewed Shannon Sun Higginson about her film and how it fit into the context of Gamergate, which launched on social media in 2014. Here is what she said about Gamergate. Or here's what was said about Gamergate, sorry. Stephen Quinn. The film was finished before Gamergate, and that was when anonymous players threatened to rape and murder female game developers, a couple of whom are actually featured in the documentary. You did a postscript to address that, and it didn't feel out of place. I mean, looking back on it, was Gamergate. Was that something you could have anticipated? Shannon Sun Higginson. The thing about Gamergate for me, and I can't speak for everyone in the movie, but I think a lot of women I spoke with and sort of caught up with after that, they sort of viewed it as one of a series of events, not a particularly odd or out of place event. It's just the one that got the most media coverage. But the point we tried to get across with the proscript is that this is just going to continue to happen and continue to escalate if we don't do anything about it. In fact, Sun Higginson does provide some context, positioning the harassment associated with hashtag Gamergate in the broader context of the challenges facing women in the gaming community. It is the opposite of your concern that Gamergate is referred to as the full extent of anti-female behavior. Miss Haber is correct in her explanation that you might have misheard what she was saying in the headline of the program. As well as a new documentary on women and gaming is screening this weekend as part of the Docs Festival. If you thought Gamergate was the full extent of the misogyny, well, then you are going to want to stay tuned to find out more. The director of GTFO will be our guest coming up. You are right, it does associate Gamergate with misogyny, but it also, like Ms. Sun Higginson is stating, that it is not the whole picture, but a symptom of the broader problem. There is no journalistic violation of the headline. Esther Inken, CBC Ombudsman.
Yeah, it's like
So they don't. She doesn't see a problem with associating this online movement that they provided zero evidence for engaging in misogyny or supporting misogyny as being inherently
oh yeah,
misogynistic or harassing.
yeah, exactly. Like you could see. I mean, like I said, you're like I can hear like the incredulity in your voice. Like it's like she's talking out of both sides of her mouth, and anyone anyone objective reading this is going to see all the holes in her arguments, and it's absolutely insane. Like I mean, like I said, it's absolutely insane some of the stuff that you like I said, if you ever want fodder for your book, you should look at some of the official responses that you see in CBC letters that absolutely make no sense. Like, just to give you an example, like this was something we actually went over, but there was one point where one of the Radio Canada, so the French CBC host, got into a row with a GamerGate supporter, like about what is it? About he challenged his claim that women were being oppressed or like systematically discriminated against or suffered excessive sexism in the workplace, and he basically treated it as a fact and compared the GamerGate supporter to a Holocaust denier for not going with that, not for challenging that assumption. And when they wrote and when this GamerGate supporter wrote to complain, right, the person who responded said something like, "We are troubled by his they didn't." This is the thing. Like, you look at the letter and your jaw drops because literally the CBC was like not objecting to the insult, but just the level of the insult. They said they said something like, and I'm paraphrasing, he's like, "We are troubled by the language used by the host. It was a bit too strong. It would have been better to not call you a Holocaust denier, but just to call you intransigent instead." It's like you read this and you're like, what? So you're not objecting to people insulting your beliefs, but like just the level of the insult. It's unbelievable.
So yourself and many other people file ombudsman complaints, officially trying to get these investigated. This is one of the investigations. There are others as well. It looks like
I will.
So
I can
real quick.
Yeah, we can go over that. Yeah,
we don't have to go over all of them, but unless there's like a specific one you really want to talk about. But any of these complaints, did they issue corrections? Did they edit the articles? Did they apologize in any of these official investigations?
Like two of the complaints on the other filed, Enkin basically twice said the same thing. There should be a nuanced description of GamerGate or something like that, but and she said CBC's journalists should be mindful of this in the future. But nothing ever came of that. As for specific corrections, I'm trying to recall here. Let me think. There was basically the Holocaust denier thing did merit an apology, but I was told by the person that the apology was not directly given to him. It was kind of like given indirectly, so I'm not sure about the details. So there's that. I'm trying to think about the correction though. Let me see. Were there ever any corrections? I can't recall right now if there ever was a correction. I don't think there ever was. No. So, like I said, the Holocaust thing was just going too far. The Holocaust denier claim was going too far, but that's about as close as you ever got to like something like that. Though I should say that the French ombudsman was better than the English ombudsman. Like, because they came to opposite conclusions. Like I said, Enkin falsely claimed that Joni had like said that Quinn had slept with game journalists for better reviews. She claimed that as a fact, but the French ombudsman researched this and actually said that in response to another a French CBC journalist making this claim that there was no evidence to support this, and the journalist was quoting English dailies that were misinterpreted or something like that. So at least he got certain details right, but it just shows like how two ombudsmen can arrive at polar opposite conclusions. It's crazy.
So all these complaints in English went to Esther, and then all of the complaints in French went to a separate ombudsman. There's only two people who do this, basically.
Yeah, yeah. They're basically the English CBC has its own ombudsman, Esther Enkin, and the French CBC had its own ombudsman. His name is Pierre Tourangeau. So yeah, he basically he admonished GamerGate. I think he, after 3 complaints, he did the same thing that Enkin did. He said, "I'm not going to cover this anymore." He said, because you're trying to weaponize the office of the ombudsman. So so that's literally what he said. Like, we will not allow the weapon, like the office of the ombudsman, to be weaponized or something like that. So yeah.
All right. So after the complaints, you do Operation Canadian Bacon 2?
Yeah.
What is Operation Canadian Bacon? I read an article about it, but
yeah. What it was basically this. We were trying to. It was kind of an idea I floated. Basically, what happens is, once the CBC shut us out, right? Then we tried to escalate things to the CRTC, which is, like I said, the Canadian Radio, Television, Communications. Basically they're like one step above the CBC, because I think it's like every couple of years, the CBC has to renegotiate with the Canadian government for getting its funding. To they have to give, like, they have to put out a plan of, like, how they're going to progress forward, what they're going to do, what goals they want to hit, and whatnot. And so what Operation Canadian Bacon 2 was, basically, we were taking advantage of an opening, we were trying to take advantage of the upcoming review of the CBC's, and renewal of the CBC's funding, to try and basically file complaints with the Canadian government about the CBC's biased coverage, and see if we could affect anything that way. And essentially, what we submitted was made part of the public record. So anyone who was looking into looking at can probably find information, can find a document I submitted, which was a really long document. I think it's included in the thing. It was called intervention. It was I think it was 100. Oh God, it's something like 166 pages. But basically, at least half of that is just references. But yeah, several of us filed complaints with the Canadian government, trying to tell the CBC, trying to inform them that the CBC was biased coverage and trying to get them to improve things. I actually got one of the, what's his name? Christopher. We actually got that video game psychologist guy who did to submit a paper, a defense of gamers, and saying, about about the current state of gaming. So that was a nice thing to do. So in any case, it was very close. I don't know how many people submitted things in the end, but many of us did try. Didn't affect much, unfortunately, but we did try. But that was at the point. Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand, what you guys were just contacting this commission to let them know that they had messed up a whole lot, messed up their coverage at GamerGate and a bunch of other topics too, possibly.
Well, basically, we were extrapolating their coverage of GamerGate to other tendencies in the CBC as a whole. This was something that I went over in my thing. We were basically, as I said, this was every couple of years, there's a renewal. There's a process where the CBC's operation budget and license is renewed. And at that time, since Canadian taxpayers pay for the CBC, they're allowed to have a say. So you can go up and you can defend the CBC, you can condemn the CBC, and you can do that. So we were trying to take advantage of that little hole in the schedule. Like we were taking advantage of the schedule to try and, like basically file a complaint against the CBC in a very public forum, using, like in an attempt to see if we could, we could get them to be better journalists, essentially. That was the idea behind this. Because, like I said, we were extrapolating this to other things. Just to give you an example, like we discussed this before. Like, let me try and find. Yeah, like there was a CBC. What's her name? Let me just make sure I get her name right. She was what's her name? Her name was Robin Urbach, right? And basically, I know Donald Trump is kind of a verboten term, but just to put it in context, like there was a tweet Donald Trump made that basically said he was going to ask Mike Pompeo to look into to the situation with South African farmers. Like if there was any racial discrimination against South African farmers or something like that. And it was just a normal, harmless tweet. And I think Robin Urbach, who was like the CBC's, what's her name? Let me see. She was the CBC News opinion columnist and producer. And what she basically responded to this tweet by saying, why type all this out when 14 words convey the same message? And of course, by 14 words, she's referring to like, what's called a slogan coined by a white supremacist named David Lane. And a complaint was filed about this as well. And basically, the response from the CBC was, the CBC was, the CBC basically said, by tweeting this incorrect information to his million of followers, she is suggesting his tweet amounted to a rallying call to the racist white supremacist element in Donald Trump's base of supporters. She was not calling the president a white nationalist as you suggested he was. So you can kind of think about that. That's the kind of crazy stuff that the CBC does. And this is just scratching the surface. That's a scary thing about the whole Gamergate thing. Gamergate is kind of like a small fry thing, but when you actually wonder about how many other people the CBC has done this to on other things they didn't like to cover because it wasn't, they didn't consider it didn't jibe with their ideology or politics, it gets pretty scary, especially since they get something like $1.3 billion in taxpayer funding every year at this point, something like that. You should, if you get that much money, you should represent all Canadians and not just, the left or progressives or whatever you want to call them.
Well, you said, you even talked about that too in your interview I read this before going on air. You did an interview with Josh Lieblein at the Post Millennial, and you told him that the Canadian Broadcasting Company uses the same tactics that they used against Gamergate, they've used against all sorts of other people and groups.
Oh yeah, they have done that. Like there was one infamous letter that we got, right? Basically, we were complaining about the balanced coverage, let's say the biased coverage of Gamergate, and one of the producers or something like that, she basically responded, balanced coverage does not mean giving equal time to both sides of an argument. That was literally her claim. She basically said that, she basically used that excuse against us, and then she used it on at least one or two other people, the same excuse, and one person called her out on it. Like I'm trying to find the exact. Let me see if I can find the. Let me just see if I can find the exact statement here. I'm looking for it. I'm trying to find. Let me just see if I can find it here. But that was basically that. Yeah, but basically they've used this tactic before. It's impossible. Like obviously, like given the amount of stuff that the CBC has deleted, like I said, the stuff tends to disappear down the memory hole. So it's very hard to check for patterns of behavior. But when I did check for a couple of things, I did see that excuse being used. And you see a lot, like if you go through enough of Enkin's interview, you can see like where her loyalties lie. but like you can see like recurring things. Like they keep saying, oh, like we don't have time to cover it in everything in one interview, like in one news story. We'll cover it in a later news story. Kind of neglecting the fact that if you present if you go with one angle to start with and you don't immediately follow it with with a different angle, like the first angle is probably going to be the one that sticks, and then the longer you delay, the longer that false, like any questionable claims has its time to kind of cement itself in the public consciousness. So yeah, you see that kind of, you see a lot of stuff like that. Like, and another thing that's really awful, it's like is like that I think no one at the very few journalists at the CBC take anything seriously. Like when, like you basically saw, like, I think GamerGate supporters were complaining to the ombudsman, and you had 3 journalists like making fun of GamerGate, like complaining to the ombudsman as if they knew nothing would ever come of it. They really felt that secure in just doing whatever they wanted. So yeah, it's crazy.
I have to ask: is there an Operation Canadian Bacon 1?
Oh God, I can't, I'm trying to I'm trying to remember why I called it the second one. I think there was a first attempt. But I don't know. I can't remember anymore because it's been so long. That one was about? I think it was a smaller one. I think I may have done it to go for one particular news story, but then I tried to expand it for the second one. That was just crazy. Yeah. Basically, I was trying to ramp it up. The first one, I think, was for one thing, and then the second one was like for a second thing, like for to go after a bigger target. Sorry, that's not as good as an answer that I could give.
So you made the post about Operation Canadian Bacon 2 on Kotaku in Action on January 7th, 2020. Is GamerGate an ongoing phenomenon? Is it a historical event? Is the movement the ride never ends? What's going on?
I've been asked that for many years. Like it's kind of become, oddly enough, I think that the most poignant and probably most accurate description actually came from like the Kiwi Farms like wiki they did on it. They basically said GamerGates has gone from has gone to being a kind of like a watchdog movement. That's just kind of like, it's kind of faded into the background, but it's kind of like a symbolic watchdog movement, and it just persists. And I kind of agree with that. It's definitely died down, but I mean, the GamerGate's opponents still mention it on a fairly regular basis. I think, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't think GamerGate will really be over until we're vindicated, or until this whole the whole web of like progressive, like journalistic misdirection is exposed for what it is. And we're kind of seeing the signs of that now with all these journalistic outlets going bankrupt. We're kind of seeing that, and it's entering into, and the whole bias in the news media is entering the public consciousness more. So like I said, I think it still lives on in one way or another. So
you say the progressive, I know what you mean, because like most of the journalists who lied about GamerGate,
yes,
obviously were like these social justice aligned people.
Yes.
And so you call them progressive. But like most of the people involved with GamerGate, at least you're looking at Brad Glasgow's research and others,
yes,
it looks like a lot of them were maybe not like, they're not woke school. Some of them were, but they're also pretty like center left people too, for the most part.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go into I'm not going to go into detail about it because I don't want to air my public laundry. But I have had my very public row with Brad Glasgow, because he made and like I said, I'm not gonna go into detail, but basically he made what I consider a very disingenuous argument. So I kind of just like distanced myself from him.
I think his research is really good. So correct me if I'm wrong, please do so.
Oh no, his research is good. What I'm saying is that there was like one. Well, since it's come up now, might as well mention it. Like basically, we what was he basically accused me of being thin-skinned and not being able to like he said like I was not willing to accept criticism of Gamergate, but that wasn't it. Basically, he was trying to like like he I don't know how to describe it. Like he was holding up the the FBI report, right?
Yeah.
Remember the FBI report on Gamergate, right? He was basically saying that Gamergate could not should accept the fact that there was a harassment component because of what appeared in the FBI report about Brianna Wu being harassed. And I was like, well, wait a second here. Like the one incident with a juvenile who engaged in harassment, in the name of Gamergate did so because he was given a false explanation of what it was by the mainstream media. And I was like, you can't blame Gamergate for that.
Wait, the minor the minor, he actually said Gamergate made him do it. I don't remember that from the report.
Well, no, basically, I'm a bit fuzzy on the details, but basically, he said there was a minor, the way I remember it, and like I said, my memory's a bit fuzzy because it's been at least 4 or 5 years since I read the FBI report, right? But basically, one of the individuals mentioned in the FBI report was a minor who, and if I remember correctly, alleges that he found out about Gamergate through news reports, and was given the false harassment narrative, and he decided to go out and harass others, or he acted upon that false information to do stuff in Gamergate's name. And I took umbrage with that because I'm like, well, wait a second, you can't, if someone does something, if the media misrepresents someone, right? And you believe the media and do something in that person's name, the original people are not responsible for that. You get what I mean, right?
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
When we talk about the harassment narrative and stuff,
Yeah.
when I first started this project, I was really expecting to find at least maybe a dozen Gamergate people who said tweets to Zoe Quinn saying I'm gonna kill you, you dumb bitch, or whatever. But I haven't found that actually. It doesn't seem like there was even. I can't find a single. That's a problem. I can't. I don't want to go around because the fact is they did receive mean tweets, right? These people did receive mean tweets, and people did threaten to kill Anita Sarkeesian. But I can't find a single. I can't find a single example of a Gamergate supporter sending a death threat to anybody.
Yeah,
there was one person. There was a list. I went through this list of an anti-Gamergate article. Actually, it was the list of 20 bad people in Gamergate, and one of the people on the list had apparently tweeted out. Not even at one of the anti-Gamergaters. Apparently, he just some random Twitter user and him got into a big Twitter argument, and he in the argument he said, "I'm gonna kill you, you dumb bitch," or something like that. Or I don't think he said that. I think he said, "I hope you die," or I don't remember exactly the wording. But that's and it wasn't some prominent person either. It was some rando. That's the only example of a Gamergate person I've ever seen threatening somebody. And I don't even know if they were a Gamergate person. That's what the anti-Gamergate article claimed. I'll assume that they were based on the article, but I haven't dug through all their tweets and found out if they actually ever tweeted on the hashtag or not.
Well, yeah, there's a couple of problems with figuring.
And the article, but they might be misrepresenting it because some of the other instances in that article, it was mostly just this celebrity said something about Gamergate, and they have a history of where they were accused of sexual harassment in 1922, 1977 or whatever. It's just dumb shit like that. It wasn't credible stuff on that list.
Yeah. Well, yeah, just to get back to what you were saying right now, right? This was actually, I think there was an MSNBC segment that actually misrepresented this. This was something that I actually noticed only several years after it happened, right? The infamous Kevin Dobson, I think, well, not the Kevin Dobson, whatever it's called, the tweets, the rape and death threats that were sent to Anita Sarkeesian in that chain of tweets, right? Remember, you know the one I'm talking about, right?
Dude, she
The
received a
K-Dobbs
lot
account.
of mean hats. I don't I don't know mean
Well,
tweets. I don't know
basically,
which.
basically there was like she posted this series of tweets. I think by K-Dobbs was the name of the account or something like that on Twitter, right? And what happened? She posted a screenshot of all these death and rape threats that she got in this Twitter thread, right? And this was for a long time. I think MSNBC was one of the outlets that said they actually doctored the tweet headers to read GamerGate, like as if that was like as if it
Oh
was like a
yeah.
person with that.
So
Yeah,
this
yeah.
was
Here's the
I covered that at the time. I made a video about it. Not the
yeah, but
Dobson
that
thing, but the editing of the tweets where they added
yeah, but
GamerGate to the screenshots when they weren't there.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that's the hilarious thing about that. I only discovered this a couple of years after it happened. Like the timing actually doesn't match. Like I think the tweets were sent a full day before Adam Baldwin coined the hashtag. So
We might be
you know,
referring to different instances, but like, again, I
no,
don't want to get too hung up on the
no.
specifics. But
Yeah, but there's that. No, I'm just saying there's that thing, right? I know, but I definitely know that I can tell you. But there was actually two things. That was the first thing. Like the tweets that the MSNBC doctored, right? Those were sent about a day before Adam Baldwin officially coined the hashtag. So attributing it to Gamergate does not work chronologically because it didn't exist at the time. But the big thing that there's a lot of misconceptions about is the claim Anita Sarkeesian made that there was, like one of the people who sent, remember the Utah school or the Utah State University incident where someone sent a threat to shoot up the school, right?
yes.
Or shoot up the university. Basically, she said one of the writers claimed affiliation with Gamergate. What happened with that incident? I'll go over this really quickly. It's like there were 3 threats sent. The first one that claimed the shooting, what mentioned the Montreal University massacre, which was like an infamous event in Quebec where some guy killed a bunch of women here. He went on a shooting spree in the 80s. But there were 2 other like copycat things. The second one was sent, and it's basically a meme filled thing. It said something like having over 9,000 bombs or something like that, and that Anita Sarkeesian done goof. It was basically filled with a bunch of memes, and it was signed like the Royal Winged Faggot Extraordinaire, Mr. Repsian. And this was the one that claimed, you can see this thing is dripping with sarcasm and insincerity. And this was what Anita Sarkeesian held up as like being sent a legitimate threat set by a Gamergate supporter. And Repsian, like Mr. Repsian, was actually investigated by the FBI by this. They went to his house and interviewed him. And what happened is, and this is an incident that a lot of people don't know about, is that 1 or 2 years ago, Mr. Repsian actually said that someone contacted him from a Gmail address that has since been deleted, or they claimed they were the ones responsible for doing that, for framing him.
Yeah,
we don't know if it's true.
Send that to me. I'd be interested in seeing that perhaps. No, and then there was the other bomb threat that she did receive at the Utah City. Again, I'm all intimately familiar with this. This has been covered in the book tons of times.
Mm-hmm.
Which doesn't mean we can't explore it again if you want to. But
okay, no. Sorry, I didn't know. I'm not totally familiar with every detail, but go on. Sorry.
No. Sorry. I probably sound like a little bit of a dick.
No, you're not.
Because it's
not
just like I have an extremely high level of knowledge of Gamergate, and so do you. And so, but I've already interviewed like over 50 people, and so like almost every aspect of it. I'm only adding new people really if I think that there's an aspect of the story that I haven't explored yet. And I think covering the specifics of the articles that were written about Gamergate and what they got wrong is an important aspect of it. And actually, I wanted to talk about that because the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, like the fact that they actually have like a system in place. No, they didn't like do a good job, of course. But the fact that they actually have a system in place and actually replied to you is, I think, impressive. Because the fact is, I've reached out to both during Gamergate and like within the past week, so many different journalists, and about who wrote articles about this. None of them will ever reply. Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Y-
One
yeah,
one person did reply, and he
yeah,
declined, and he was kind of a dick about it. I was maybe
yeah,
slightly a bit of a dick response, but then I sent an email like following up like, hey, I want to clarify. But yeah, no, none of these people will reply. None of these people will ever do any research at all. They're never willing to defend their positions. They're never
yeah.
willing to even address their
Mhm.
critics. They're not willing to be like, okay, look, maybe I got this aspect of the story wrong. Let's explore that, or even just, hey, I want to talk about my article. These people, it was like that during GamerGate. It's like that now. They-
Yeah,
It's
it's
like there's no
yeah,
one. None of these people. They're so most of them are so
yeah,
thin-skinned.
yeah. Well, the thing is that
And
the
Kerensky
thing
always
is that
says
yeah,
there's nothing more hypocritical
yeah,
than a thin-skinned journalist.
yeah. One of the things though, like just to add to this, like it's one of fate's horrendous ironies about who covered Gamergate first, because I honestly do wonder. Like there was a mentality at the CBC at the time. Like I said, because of all because it's really hard to find specific things and establish all patterns because of what gets memory hold, right? There was like I'd say the person who might have the most responsibility in pushing Gamergate coverage at the CBC in particular direction was the person who first mentioned it, John Bowman, the same guy who interviewed Jennifer Daw and Jenny Barrage, because really, like he was arguably, like I said, it's one of fate's worst ironies that he was the one who covered it, because he was like the worst possible candidate to cover it, and he and he did cover it, and that's the problem. Like, for example, he was when he was confronted about the angle, and he said, like, in a tweet, he said, the fact is, ethics in video game journalism is not a topic of interest to a broad radio or online audience. The harassment of women in technology is of wide interest. So you can kind of see that's the angle he was going there. And there's a lot of weird, just to go over this, I'll try to go over it really fast. Like, there's a lot of weird things you see, like you see like a pattern of behavior that is really shows how bad it was. Like, basically what happened is that there was like in the interview, like where he first covered Gamergate in one, I think in the in he covered Gamergate in the text version but not the audio version. But in that first article on Gamergate from the CBC, he interviewed I think Natalie, I forget what her name is, but like she interviewed someone, right? Like about Gamergate, like the whole situation, how it is, like I think she was writing a paper on it, and what happened was that they'd actually known each other for about 8 or 9 months before, like, he interviewed her for like the Gamergate segment. So you kind of wonder, well, wait, I don't have any evidence of how close they were, but you kind of wonder, like, did you pick this at random, or did you pick her to interview about this because you knew which way she'd lean in her responses? And then, it just has bad optics, I find. But are we okay? Or
Yeah, we're good.
stream? Oh, okay. Well, the other thing is, like, what happens is that Bowman was twice reprimanded for his biased news coverage. Kind of. What happened was that Bowman was in charge of the CBC social media accounts, and he would always sign his tweets with like JB. And there was one time where I think I'll give you the details, but basically what happened was that one of the members of, I think, the Liberal government was accused of like renovating the like his one of his like the houses belonging to the thing, and a chart, and like to the tune of like $800,000 or something like that. And this was like a big thing, using that much public money, like service money for this. And it basically, the CBC just briefly covered it. And he got into an argument with people online saying it wasn't that newsworthy, and or calling it a complete lie. And it escalated to the point where he got into an argument with someone who was a then Canadian member of parliament who literally posted receipts. Like, she posted the receipt for the bill. She basically called him out while he was using the CBC's official social media accounts to argue with people. And then it went silent for a few hours, and then like the CBC, someone at the CBC took the reins away from him and basically said, this coverage did not meet our usual standards for the CBC's news coverage. And they kind of acknowledged it. And then he went on a rant, about last thing, like he went on a rant about a case where a Twitter feminist had basically almost sent someone to jail for mean tweets in Canada in a court case. And he was basically like, and someone complained about his lack of neutrality, and the person said, and his boss actually responded and said, given Bowman's tweets, I can see how a reasonable person would have a reasonable belief. It was a reasonable belief for a normal person to have that this man is not a neutral arbiter of what constitutes harassment. So this was the man who basically kicked off the whole GamerGate coverage thing. So it was like a really bad convergence.
So if it weren't for John Bowman screwing it up, the articles might have been the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's coverage might have been more fair and nuanced.
It might have been more fair and nuanced. Like there's a chance I think it might have been, but I can't say for sure, because one of the things that you're gonna if you listen to the Jennifer Daw interview, he mentions a piece about women in the I think about a month before he reported on Gamergate. There was the CBC put out this ridiculous piece on women in the gaming industry, where the host made all kinds of crazy claims. Like she basically claimed, like she played a clip of like a woman being shot in Grand Theft Auto 3, and she claims that it's no surprise that video games are filled with sexism, misogyny, and it's no surprise that video game development is filled with the same stuff. And I'm like, are you like, this is like, tabloid level sensationalism. And she basically interviewed like some women in the gaming industry. I think the segment ran for like almost half an hour, but it was like almost all of it, except the last 30 seconds, was negative or like leaning negative. And he excitedly mentioned this to Jennifer Daw in his interview about a recent piece the CBC had done. So I suspect that, there was already a mentality there, and he just kind of ran with it. So I think that there is a good chance, if it hadn't been him covering this, there might have been a better chance for a bit of neutrality. But, it's given the mentality of the CBC at the time, it's hard to say.
All right. Now I know you said you had to go at 8:30 EST.
Well,
do you want to go a few minutes after if we?
Yeah, I can go a few minutes longer.
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So I want to give you a chance to wrap things up. But first, you told me that you were seriously thinking about writing a book about the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's coverage of Gamergate.
Yes, I was actually. I'm kind of trying to see how this year goes. Like, I think this is going to be, as I mentioned before, like this is kind of like, last year, like there seemed to be like a lot of the, how do I put it? I mean, you and I know from our experience with Gamergate how unreliable the media is, right? But it seems like it's only entering public consciousness exactly how bad it is, now. Like 2023 was like the year like the masks started coming off. And I'm hoping that 2024 will be the year that it completely drops. Let's put it that way. And I'm hoping to find, like, I'm kind of trying to see how the winds are blowing before I fully commit to it and and write a book on it. But yeah, I am thinking of basically expanding my complaint into a fuller thing, like into a fuller coverage.
I think you should. I want to see more people doing projects like this. And Airplay, like my book,
Yeah.
and the Airplay documentary, James Desborough's book, my first book.
Yeah.
I think we need more people doing real historical and journalistic and research into this stuff and publishing it in real formats.
Oh yeah,
Actual physical
definitely.
book. We need this. We need the history to survive and the truth to survive, and we need people doing actual research. So I think you should do it. I think Thoughtful Salt should do it too. I know you're both considering writing books. Um,
Yeah.
I think you should
Yeah, I
do it.
mean, there's so much. Yeah, well, I appreciate the encouragement. Like I said, I'm just trying to see like where the winds are blowing now, like if it's a good time to do it or not. Because like now it seems like would probably be the best time because, like I said, if the mask completely slips and people become receptive and start asking questions, like this didn't just start now. Like how far back does this go? I think that a GamerGate book would probably be a good thing because then that pushes it back 10 whole years. And then you can see how much further you can push it back. It's going to be a pretty ugly picture and a rude awakening for a lot of people, I think, when they finally figure out how long the media's been lying to them.
So you think that the narrative will change? You think that GamerGate will have that the truth will come out over the coming years?
I It's hard to say. Like, it's hard to say. I'm hoping that it will, but like you can't really be sure of anything. Like, there's certain things that become like, I don't know how to put it. Like I said, they become cemented in the public consciousness, and I'm not. It's going to take a lot of effort to try and dislodge it. I'm still around though, and I'm willing to do my part by writing a book to try and help that process. But we'll have to see.
Reach out to me when you decide to publish the book, or when you're either decide to do it or decide to publish it. I'll
Yeah.
interview you on my show.
Thanks. I'll definitely keep that in mind. The problem is now, like, I'm trying to figure out. I think one of the big things I'm trying to figure now is a way to do this because, I'm trying to make this thing not be like a giant ad hominem attack on Brianna Wu, Zoe Quinn, and like Anita Sarkeesian, but I think that that's a bit unavoidable in the sense that all their what's called, how do I put this? Their credibility is, as like the veracity of their claims is linked to their credibility, which very few people realize that they don't really have. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to approach this because like you said earlier in the interview, Quinn has like basically like an entire cemetery full of skeletons in her closet. I'm trying to figure out like if we should mention all of this beforehand before we like we do, like before I follow GamerGate, if I should just do chapters on like their history to kind of show what it was like going into this, or if I should take another format.
That's up
It's
to
one of
you.
those things.
I've run into this problem. When I first started the project, I wasn't going to talk about Zoe Quinn, Brianna Wu, or Anita Sarkeesian really that much. Well, Anita Sarkeesian has like a lot of ideas she puts out in the world. Critiquing those is fine. Critiquing anybody's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't want to go that route. And then I learned a lot, and I realized I have to cover it. I had to include it. Just stick to the facts,
Oh no, that's definitely it. You have to
Yeah.
stick to the facts. You can't get too distracted by certain things, though. Maybe we can exchange information on certain things because I know that there's stuff that's been memory hold, like the whole when when I think Crash Override Network was exposed and you had all these people claiming that they'd been used and manipulated by Quinn or like used as kind of like slave labor for writing her book. That might be an interesting thing to.
Well, I haven't explored that
look into
aspect of her. I've more explored other aspects of her history. But if you want to send me stuff on that, yeah, we can definitely collaborate. No, I don't want to like, yeah, I don't want to be like, I'll send you the research I have. You send me the research you have. I don't want to be like, I don't want to be like, oh, hey, you know what? Fuck it, I don't care. If it's all factually accurate, I don't care. But I don't,
Yeah.
I don't want to be like, oh, look at this person like spreading rumors about Zoe Quinn, But like, if you have factually accurate information, or I have factually accurate information, we can share that. For sure.
That's one of the big things I think we need to. That's one reason, like, I'm trying to figure this out because there's a lot of speculation and rumor out there that we can't really prove, and it's best we stick to, like you said, it's best we stick to the facts.
Yeah.
Like what happened with Alec Holoka. That's something that is verifiably true. you can search Quinn's entire social media history of that time, and you know exactly what happened there, or almost exactly. You know that what she later claimed, there is no evidence for it, or at least no public facing evidence for it.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's one of those, like, there's one tweet of I mean, it's hard for me to find it now that she's blocked in the way that Twitter has now been changed. But one thing I am trying to find is that one infamous tweet of Brianna Wu's where she was trying to there was like a slide where she presented evidence of some of the death threats and harassment she got, and it was in a picture, and you could see it's like the most milquetoast, banal, like normal sounding stuff that, and then you kind of wonder, like, how many of these hundreds of death threats she claims to have, like, actually happened. You look at the evidence, you look at what she defines as a death threat. It blows the mind. I've got to refine that tweet.
Well, yeah, if you find it, send it to me. She did receive at least two harassing tweets, actually. I can confirm. At least three, actually, from three people. One of them might have been herself, though. One of which was just so we're fair to Brianna Wu, I guess.
Yeah.
Pterodax, not a GamerGate person, third-party troll.
Mm-hmm.
He harassed people on both sides. He did tweet a picture of a gun at her, and GamerGate people mass reported it. That could be seen. That could be perceived as being a death threat, right?
Yes, that could be. Yes.
Yeah, and he bribed people on social media with Super Smash Brothers DLC codes if they sent death threats to Zoe Quinn and blamed GamerGate for it. I've got receipts on all this. I can send it to you.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
That'd be good. Yeah.
And then Avius, third-party troll, also didn't even know what GamerGate was. He was 14 years old at the time. He sent some mean tweets to Brianna Wu. I don't think death threats or anything, but like gore pictures. He sent a couple at her. Most likely.
Yeah, there
were people who did send her like mean stuff. They just weren't GamerGate people mostly.
That's true. But the one thing that I've always found really, with a lot of the harassment things that have been made, one of the weirder things that I've found, like, because I actually have archives of like the death to Brianna account tweets.
Yeah,
like,
I've got that too.
But what one thing that I cannot for the life of me understand is why Brianna Wu favorited and retweeted some of them. I cannot for the life of me understand why you do that.
Did she? Because
yes,
I've seen the original archive of the profile that has the docs in it. But people have archived that page like 7,000 times, probably to bury the docs. So like I haven't gone through like all 7,000 archives to find out like the exact moment at which someone liked a tweet.
Yeah, but I mean, there's like so many, like, the thing is, like, like to figure out, like, I mean, this is in one of my documents, which you're free to actually go over. I mean, you can find, like, there's several confirmed, confirmed people who actually engaged in harassment, like Wild Goose and the Bill Wagner crew.
Yeah, sure.
Have publicly admitted that they went, like, that they tried to, to try to play both sides off against each other. There was that weird Brazilian writer, what is it, Mateus Prado Sousa? Yeah, who did that. There was Eclipso, Swatanon. Remember him?
I don't remember him, but if you have receipts on him, I'll take a look.
Oh yeah, definitely. Basically, what he did is, like, he was like on Bahamut, and he was like taking requests on who to swat, and he was the one who swatted like Devi Ever and Izzy Galvez. And he also, and this I cannot verify, but he claimed in an article written by, I think, one of Quinn's supporters, right? He claimed in an anonymous message board post, or someone claiming to be him, was allegedly, like, he claimed in an anonymous message board post that he was responsible for the bomb threat at the Kubik Center that disrupted the SPJ Airplay event. So that was interesting.
Yeah, maybe I should be interviewing him. But see, what Well, I thought about interviewing Wild Goose.
Yeah,
But I didn't because I don't want him to like I don't care about my like whatever. Like I'm an adult. But like I don't want him to like dox people in my community. And that's something he like
no, no,
really did back then. So for the sake of like so I banned him from the YouTube chat. I thought about if he wants to reach out to me and we could do the interview off site, like if we could do it like somewhere other than a Discord or something, or on like a different
yeah,
person's Discord server, somebody else wants to host that. Maybe
yeah.
we do it, but like I don't want him in my Discord where he could possibly dox people or
Oh,
members
I
of my community.
Oh no, I completely understand that. I'm just saying that this is one of those things that you can actually. This is one of those things that I actually intend to explore if I write the book. I'm going to say, well, like if not GamerGate, then who did do the harassment? And you do have several candidates,
But dude,
and you have
this
several incidents.
Eclipso guy, he actually called in the bomb threat at the Kubik Center.
Like, okay, just to clarify, so I'm not responsible for spreading bombs, like for not spreading bombs, for spreading false rumors. Okay, Eclipso, like he used to go by the name Eclipso, or like he used the name Eclipso on Twitter after taking over someone else's account, and he used SWAT Anon on the old Infinite Chan Bahamut board, right? And he took requests there on who to SWAT. And what happened, and I think that's why he swats like he swatted like Devi Ever and like Izzy Galvez. But what happened was that there was an article written by one of Zoe Quinn's confidants, and I'll try and find. Let me see. I have to find it. Hold on. But Idle Dilettante. Remember her?
No,
She
I don't.
basically what happened was no, but basically what happens is that she claimed in an article she wrote, she had like a screen cap of the post, but like she cut out everything else. Basically, someone claiming to be Eclipso slash Swatanon went on a message board, I think on Infinite Chat, and claimed that he was responsible for calling in the bomb threat at the SPG Airplay event. Now, obviously, the tweet, like the post, was quickly deleted. So, and of course, anyone can post any kind of garbage on a message board. I
Was
could,
it? Was he? I don't. I'll just say. Was he trip fagging?
I have no idea. Like, I'm
Because
just
if
saying
we
that
if he was, then we'd be able to prove it, right? Because we'd be able to see his trip and determine it was him, unless someone like got access to his account.
yeah, that's true. Like, I don't know. I'm just saying, like I said, someone claiming to be like, I have to look up the exact details, but like I said, someone claiming to be him went on another board message on a message board and claimed to have been and claimed responsibility for it. But of course, there's absolutely no way to determine this because the mods got rid of the tweet, like got rid of the post.
And
So
nobody
I
archived it or screenshot it even.
I don't think anyone archived or screenshot, not that I know of. But like I said, this was the claim made, and I find it very odd that, like I said, I cannot prove this, but I find it very odd that someone who is anti-Gamergate would actually, you know, would mention that,
Well, give me the
would
article.
mention something that,
Yeah,
yeah, I will link you.
yeah.
Like I said, I find it very strange that someone would, like, who's anti-Gamergate would make that kind of exculpatory claim about a specific person who is known to be like a professional agitator. So, like I said, I find it very strange that someone who's like literally like that close to Quinn would do something like that. But let me see. If I find it, I will definitely let you know. Like I have it here, like I have it somewhere here, and I will let you know if I can dig it up. But like I said, it's only like a screenshot of the actual claim, and it's not like a huge screen like with all the dates and times and everything's on it, but at least like it exists. That's all I can say about that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, hey.
All right.
I'll give you the closing pitch here. Sum up for me. Well, actually, you know what? Fuck it. You wanna? I'll give you two. I'll give you a couple. Okay. First, I want you to sum up your issues with the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation and their coverage of GamerGate, and what you want the readers and the audience to take away from that.
Well, I would say that that's a really good question. Like, I mean, I think your reading of that one particular ombudsman report kind of says it all. Like, the CBC has journalistic standards and practices, but based on my experience, they have creative ways of getting around them that I think that they definitely used on Gamergate. And my concern is how many other people this has been subject to. So I do not trust their news coverage at all. And I think the basic thing is, if there's any message I have to anyone, your readers or listeners out there, I would say just be, like, approach any, like, even if you like a news outlet, approach their claims objectively and with, like, with consideration, because you never know. Like, you literally know, like, just be critical and, like, do critical thinking about the media you consume. If anything, Gamergate has taught all of us, it's probably that. And the CBC is no exception. The only thing being it's state funded, like, propaganda from the Canadian government.
All right, and obviously you're not just a guy who criticizes the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. You're a human being, and you're a human being who cared about a lot of different things, cares about a lot of different things. One of the things you cared about was Gamergate. Is there anything you want to say about that for the audience? And I know you'll have a chance to in the text interview, which I'll send you right after. But anything you want to say about Gamergate?
Well, I would say, like, well, it was a crazy ride that that consumed several years of my life, which given my, like, my problems with maintaining my attention, was actually quite surprising how much time it took up. It was a wild, crazy ride. I made a lot of friends, some of whom I'm still in contact with. Like, I'm not going to out them, but there's actually a group of friends. I think there's about how many, like, at least 5, 6, 7 of us. We started talking, and most of us are still in a Skype chat, like, that's been going on for, like, at least 6 or 7 years now. So I have made some crazy friends along the way, and that's something that I loved. But I'm still hoping, like I said, the final chapter on Gamergate hasn't been written. So, I guess we'll see what happens from here on out. Hopefully your book will change that. Maybe mine will help too in that respect.
Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Nothing comes to mind now. I just hope it was a good interview for you and informative.
Yeah, I think it was very informative. I think I was a bit of an asshole.
In what sense? In what sense?
I think because, like, you wanted to explore these different areas, and I knew we only had a limited amount of time.
Oh no!
I wanted to go down them, like, but I've already talked about that in, like, 5 of the interviews so far in the book. So, like, I'm like, I really? But I wanted to let you, like, if we had a more free form, I would let you just.
Oh no! I completely no! I have a tendency to be expansive and go off topic. It's not a problem. I totally did not take it that way.
The way I said it was kind of dickish. I could have been like, "Hey, do you really want to go there?" We can.
Yeah, no! Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it at all. I will try and find like I said, I am looking for the interview right now, and if I find it, I will let you know.
Yeah, but definitely. Let me know about the SWAT Anon Eclipso guy, because that's that article about him from the anti-Gamergate person. That'd be really interesting to explore.
Well, the thing is, like, mostly, like, it's actually, like, if you look in my folder, there's actually, you know what? Let me just double check my folder. Maybe you already have access to the information. One moment. Give me a second here.
Well, we can go. Check. We have to do this on air. But thank you for watching, everybody.
Yep. Thank you for listening. I hope I wasn't too boring or crazy for you guys.
I guess we'll raid. When's she starting though? Oh, that's way later. Never mind. All right, no one's online, so I guess we'll just go ahead and close stream.